Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA. Another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A. Coming to you live from the Holy Land, Rabbi Tovia Singer. Rabbi, welcome back.
Good to be back.
Good to have you back for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
difficult. Yeah.
How are you doing up there, health wise, and with the whole? I know some people are struggling with like internal depression and things because they're just cabin fever. They can't. A lot of people can't deal with that, you know.
Right. So I'm doing fine. I really miss well, here it is. I'm fine because I'm staying very, very safe. I actually went out today because I wanted to pick up some masks. My worry really is about others. And in particular, my parents. My parents are not young, and I worry about them a lot. That's what's on my mind. I have a feeling that for most of the viewers, your deepest concern is about somebody else who you think might be more vulnerable. But that said, they're all staying safe. Here in Jerusalem, it's rather quiet, probably quiet like where you live. One of the striking things that I just saw, because I don't, I don't go out much, but you're allowed to go to the pharmacy, and so one of the striking things that I could see here, not only in Jerusalem but around Israel, hotels are being used by the government to house of victims of corona, people who have the virus. And it's striking that from my window there's a hotel, across the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably 75 feet from my window. And they have an open mirpeset. It's kind of a balcony, fairly large balcony. And I could see a whole bunch of them, and they're among themselves people who've been infected with the virus. They should have a complete and speedy recovery, and they're not wearing face masks because they're all infected, so they don't need to do that. And, that's very striking to see, one sense, out the window, healthy people, and then to see an open balcony of people who are infected, who are struggling, and that to see that is very, very striking. And I wish those who are struggling a refuah shalema. My thoughts, my prayers are with you. And I'm staying hunkered down, getting a lot of studying done. And my thoughts are always moving quickly, observing this series of events that are unfolding as we speak. How are you doing, Leah?
I'm doing well. Baruch Hashem, our family staying safe and healthy. We had some really severe storms that blew through here this morning about 4:35, and a couple of days ago some severe storms, but we got the moisture from it. Baruch Hashem, that was it. So no high winds hit us in a damaging sense. But overall, we're doing okay. Provision-wise, a lot of people are panicking over the grocery food and the toilet paper issue. So, but because we have been so used to living out in the country, we've always shopped for months of food at a time instead of just buying for the week. So we already had, before all this hit, we already had stuff, on reserve. So we, so far, Baruch Hashem, have not been affected negatively that way. So work is the only area that's kind of weird because I'm in construction, and so most of my customers are. Most of them are older people, and they get nervous. They want to kind of stay safe, which I totally understand. And so work is definitely slowed down. But as far as everything else goes, we're still keeping our head above water. So, Baruch Hashem. So, anyway, thank you for asking about that. All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and tell us your question.
Yes, my name is Nick, and I am very new at this. I just made my decision last month, on the 20th, as a matter of fact. But my question is this. As a Noahide, or a Jew, my parents are buried in a Catholic cemetery. Now, am I allowed to go to the cemetery and pray for them there? As I understand it, I cannot go into a Catholic church because of the images and statues and things like this. But at a cemetery, there's the same situation. They have images and statues of all over. Okay?
Perfect. Okay, Rabbi, did you get the question okay?
Yeah, that's really an excellent question.
Okay, great.
Really an excellent question.
All right, take it away.
So, as it turns out, it is forbidden for anyone to pray in the presence of a statue. That's what's a very grave issue. So, going to a Catholic cemetery for your parents, you become a Ben Noach, welcome home. And people do visit their deceased family. What is important to do is to not pray in a Catholic cemetery. To attend is one thing, but not to even engage in any behavior that could be construed to be praying. So if you want to be there, and that's fine, but in the presence of any statue, any idol, you can't even pray in the same room. For example, if someone has to go to a hospital, please God, it's for a good reason, having a baby, and it's a Catholic hospital, and there's a crucifix in the room, it's forbidden to pray in that room. You can ask to remove it, you can put something to cover it, but you can't pray in that room. I remember when I lived in Indonesia, I would frequently go to Bali, one of 17,000 islands in Indonesia. Bali is an island whose inhabitants are predominantly Hindu. When I say they're Hindu, they're very, very, very religious Hindus. I am told they're much more devout than the vast majority of Hindus, let's say, in India. And there are statues everywhere. In fact, every home, it's not that I'm just told, you could see it, every home has an altar where they bring offerings every day. It's just everywhere. There are statues and altars and just everywhere. So there was almost nowhere you can pray, certainly not outdoors. So you can go into your room and you can pray, but it's forbidden to pray in the presence of a statue. You certainly should never go into a Catholic church. You should never go into any church, because churches are filled with worshipers who pray to a man, who are worshiping a man as God, and that is the very grave sin. The images are a great sin, to pray to an image, or even to do anything that would give the appearance of such, but it is the worship of something that is not God that is a much more grave sin. And an even more grave sin is to worship the true God and any association with him. And you might ask, well, how do I know all this? Well, because we can see that in the order of the Ten Commandments. The very first commandment is in Exodus 20, for example, starting in verse 2. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher haitzesicha me'eretz Mitzrayim beis avodim. I am the Lord your God, who took you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Lo yihye lecha Elohim acher al panei. You shall have no other gods upon my face, upon my face. Now, as you could see that those al panei, those last two Hebrew words, are vestigial at first glance. They don't, what is on my face? It means that you're worshiping God, but there's some other deity that's in partnership with him. The doctrine of the Trinity would be the mother lode of this vile idolatry, because Christians worship the true God, but they also worship Jesus as well, and that association is terrible. So if you're going to go to the grave of your parents, don't pray there, and don't engage in any kind of behavior that appears that you're praying, because there's statues everywhere there. So that all said, just a point about praying for your parents. So certainly one other point should be made is that praying for your parents, what does that precisely mean? Certainly one should never pray to anyone who's deceased. In fact, it's forbidden to pray to anyone but God, the one God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's forbidden. Never do that. It's praying for a parent. Well, what does that mean? That idea is not in Tanakh, and it should invite a question as, what am I praying for? I mean, anything that I am asking of God for my parents, He knows already. It's not like, God would hear that and go, oh, I never considered that. So praying for someone who's passed away is not a great idea. There is a great idea. There's something you can do, and you don't need to go to the cemetery for this, and really don't do this at home. Think about, how your father changed your life, impacted your life, and how he has made you the person you are today. And although you now are a Noachai, which means you have embraced the Jewish faith, Judaism is your faith, and apparently it was not that of your parents, but in some way your mom raised you in such a way that made you the man that you are today. And you could be grateful to Hashem for who you are because of them. And if your mom, for example, inspired you to care for the needy, if your father inspired you to give charity, and you give charity thinking that, my dad really inspired me, that is good for their souls. That is good for their souls. Because when you inspire someone else to do a mitzvah, you receive reward for that as well. As far as their belief system, only God knows what they really believed, what choices they had. May have grown up in a world where they just knew nothing else besides Christianity. To the Jew, this is very odd, but I see this constantly where, although theoretically Americans or Italians or Irish could convert to Judaism, there is a complex equation in the West in particular that believing God means Christian, and not believing God means, well, just not believing in God. Well, Judaism is theoretically possible for most people. It's not until recently. That's all changing in the last 10, 20, 25 years, where people are more and more in touch with the Jewish faith, more aware of Judaism, and Torah is spreading, and it's touched your heart, and Hashem should continue to raise you up. I would encourage you also to research your mother's genealogy. That's a very good idea, but just be really careful about that. You should be careful not to even not even admire anything that's any idolatry of any kind, and to not engage in any prayer or bowing your head, kneeling, any of those things in a Catholic cemetery. And right, you should not enter a Christian church. Doesn't make a difference if it's Protestant or Catholic. The statues that are there are the illicit statues that are there. The gravity of that is not as great as the worship that's going on there. So Protestants feel that Catholics they have statues. Well, they don't realize that it's like many Protestants feel a sense of relief that I'm not a Catholic. It's like watching someone on a treadmill smoking a cigarette. That's what watching a Protestant is. They're avoiding the statues or Mary worship, but they worship Jesus and they worship the Trinity. So imagine you're in a gym and there's someone on a treadmill and he's smoking a cigarette on the treadmill. So you would say to the person, "What are you doing?" "But you're smoking. It's so dangerous." "No, but I'm on a treadmill." Do you realize that the smoking does far more damage than any benefit that could be derived from the treadmill? Treadmill's not offsetting the severe damage you're doing to your lungs. That's what's happening with them. I say this, I care about people very, very much. Thank you so much for your thoughtful question.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to this next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. You're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Good morning. This is Shaul calling from Detroit.
Shaul, welcome.
First of all, I wanted to thank you. First of all, I wanted to just hope everyone that is happy and healthy and safe, and everyone just hunker down and just keep davening. My question, I know that Rabbi, I think he's touched on it before, but I think it's appropriate, maybe especially today. If Rabbi Kissinger talk about the validity or not his thoughts on the TALPIOT tomb. Right. My question is basically, is not a Jewish custom. Luckily, the body has to go in the ground. We don't keep remains of body. It's my understanding that they would keep these limestone boxes to house remains of bodies. And maybe just talk about the validity of it and the validity also of the different names that have supposedly were found in the tomb.
Rabbi, are you familiar with this?
I am.
Okay, very good. Perfect.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you, Shaul. Thank you, and have a great day. Go ahead and hang up now. Tune in for your answer. Bye. Yeah, we've actually never had that question on air before, so that's cool.
No, we haven't. That's it.
Yeah. So explain what, I guess a lot of people don't know what the TALPIOT tombs and stuff are, so. Okay, so take it away.
Here's what I'll explain what I'm familiar with. I am not only not an expert, I'm somewhat familiar with the TALPIOT tomb, but the go-to person on that question is Professor James Tabor, who's a dear friend and really a first-class scholar, and he's not the only one. He's done much of the research on that. He's the go-to person as far as which names are found in that tomb. And obviously you would expect you have the names like Yeshua and Mary and Joseph in a tomb here in Jerusalem, not in the old city. It's a suburb. It's larger Jerusalem area, but all the names that are there, I'm not familiar with. He's done that work. So just full disclosure. Now, as far as burial practices, well, as it turns out, during a relatively small period of time, it's, let's say, from about the year about 100 BCE till around maybe 200 or so, around there. I might be off, but it's around there, just a few hundred years. There was number one, a practice to bury a body in a cave, and then it would be covered with a stone. And you see this in Israel all over the place, especially when I'm guiding tours. And the stone was, so you had a hollowed out rock, and inside they had shelves for bodies. The body was placed there, and then the stone, really quite a heavy stone, was placed in front of, a round stone placed in front of the opening because, I mean, for obvious reasons, and also because to prevent scavengers, animals, from going into the tomb and from devouring the dead, which would have been a tremendous disgrace to the deceased. That was a practice. We actually have tombs. You can see them in the north quite a bit, and they have some sort of covering for the opening. And then there was a practice, and it was the custom at the time, not for everyone. I mean, such a tomb would have required quite a bit of work, but there was a practice of, in English, it would be the gathering of the bones, which means that a year later, these bones were, a year later, all that's left are bones. The bones are then gathered and placed in a bone box. No one practices this today, but that was a custom at the time. That bone box is called an ossuary. And some people had quite elaborate, names and designs on the outside of the bone box, and then that was stored. And literally, we have thousands of those here in Eretz Yisrael. Many of them on display in the Israel Museum. You can see them there. So that was a practice. It wasn't for a very long time, but it was for a short time. And the key of Jewish burial is to do it very, very quickly, and to do everything to preserve the integrity of the dead, and certainly not cremation, and to avoid embalming. There was exceptions made in battle. I don't want to talk. It's beyond the scope of the question. There were exceptions that were made, never for cremation, never, but for some other way to store a body so disease would not spread in extraordinary place. So because that was the custom at a certain time, that was an acceptable manner of interment. What is really important is you would never have what you find in the Gospels, that the body would have been anointed. A man's body would have been anointed by women. As we're told in the Gospels, the women went to the tomb, Mark 15 and Luke 24, to anoint his body. First of all, no one would anoint the body after it's already been interred. No one would do that. Never. You never heard of that done today, that someone's buried and they unburied. That's never done. As it turns out, women would never anoint a man's body, and conversely, men would never wash a woman's body. That would just never happen. And the suggestion of that was the reason why the women returned to the tomb demonstrates that the people who are writing these Gospels were really unfamiliar with Jewish practice. It was very alien to them. Now, like today, people know a lot about Judaism than other religions. Judaism is at the time, I think 10% of the empire was Jewish. It was something along those lines. So Judaism was a very popular religion. So people had some thumbnail sketch of Jewish practice, but they weren't really familiar. Very much like today. People have a good idea about things Jews do, but they don't really know. And you could tell when people don't really know. The authors of these Gospels really didn't know. And the other thing that they really didn't know is that no one would put spices with the dead body after the body's already been interred. The whole point of adding spices to the body for the eulogy, for the funeral, for the escorting of the body to the grave is because as soon as a person dies, that person's body immediately begins to decay. And you don't want to have a foul odor during the time that there's a eulogy, during the time where the body's being brought for burial, that would be a tremendous disgrace to the deceased. So there were very strong spices used that would disguise, that would mask any possible odor of the body. So that's used until it's in the ground or in a tomb. But you wouldn't dig it up to put spices. That couldn't happen. That's completely ridiculous. Now this makes it makes it transparent that the gospel writers had a limited understanding of Jewish traditions. And, it's not like even Mark sat and wrote all this down based on his observations. And don't believe that he was a secretary for Peter. That's all nonsense. These were stories that developed orally for a time, and then people started to write them down. Mark wrote them down from previous sources that did not survive. Matthew and Luke used Mark, not just extensively, almost all of Mark, and another source and other sources. And then they assembled this all together. But nobody goes to a tomb to dig it up, open it up, and the body's decaying to then add spices. That makes no sense at all. It's silly. Women wouldn't. So these are transparently fake stories. And no display why anybody would go back to a grave, because normally people, once a person's buried, people would mourn, but people don't typically go back to a grave. Typically, it's just not. That's not tradition. They might return to the grave at a later time, but the gospel writers wanted to form. It's not that they were that creative. Again, these were stories that just began to circulate, and they wanted to come up with a device where they can explain why someone would immediately feel an urgency to return to a tomb, lo and behold, to find an angel or two angels or one man at the tomb. So that's why there's so many differences or contradictions in the Passion narratives, in the resurrection accounts, because they're all floating stories with how do you explain that the tomb was found to be empty. That never happened. Anyways, thank you for your question.
Yeah, good answers too. Yeah, James Tabor, he's an awesome scholar there for sure. Okay, moving on to the next caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. You're live on the air. Callers, remember when you call in, keep your phone handy because you won't know when we're actually talking. A little bit of a delay.
Yes, hello?
You're live on the air. Can you tell us your name, where you're calling from?
Yes, this is Brian from Massachusetts.
Brad, welcome.
So my question is a bit of a personal one. I'll try to keep my situation a little brief.
Okay, sure.
So both of my parents are Jewish, but they never grew up in a observant house. And ever since moving to the U.S., they lost even more touch. And after a couple of years, they started going to church, and then I was included in this, and then I started going. And then for some reason, my dad started studying more about the Torah more than he would about the New Testament, which was a bit odd at the time. And then he started, tracing back his genealogy. And then as time went on, he started accepting more his heritage. And I really liked this. And for me, it was natural. So I started also doing this. And then eventually we left the church. But my mom is still in the church. And there's kind of a little conflict in our house. And, for example, me and my dad, we only observe the more individual commandments like kosher and these things. But there is still a little conflict. Like, we do not fully observe the Sabbath or Pesach. And I'm trying to be more observant. And these things really hurt me in a way because I realized our heritage and where we come from, and it's just sad. It's sad that we had to depart from this. And I'm just wondering if you cannot, that's perfectly fine. But if you can bring some insight to what I can do or what I should do, and it's also hard for us to contact any local rabbi because my dad said that it wouldn't be all right if we mentioned that we went to the church and all of these things. So if you can provide an insight, that'd be very thankful. Thank you.
Perfect.
So let me, before you get off,
Yes.
first of all, thank you for calling. Second, I'd like to be in touch with you personally, if that's all right.
Yes.
I'd like to help you through this. And, on air, we could talk just a little bit, but it's probably better if we talk personally. And if you send me an email, you can find my email address on our website, outreachjudaism.org. I'd like to just to talk because my question, so I'd like to talk if that would be okay with you personally.
Yes.
Rabbi, do you
Yes,
want to keep him on the phone, Rabbi, or should he?
Yeah, just for a second.
Okay, sure, okay.
Just for a second. So
The email address is on your screen, by the way.
Oh, good. Okay, there you go. So my question to you, first of all, I am just so grateful you called in. Just so grateful. Happy Passover. Welcome home. This is a really a wonderful thing. And your parents, your mother is Jewish by birth. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So then let's be very clear that you are as Jewish as I am. Okay. Whatever your parents did has no bearing on your Jewishness. You are completely Jewish if your mother is Jewish, and your mother is Jewish if her mother is Jewish. And your mother's converting to Christianity in no sense, in no way, robs you of your Jewish heritage. You are 100% Jew, okay, in every way. It is true that your mom, she should be well, should learn more about the Jewish faith and consider returning to the Jewish faith. I can imagine that there could be tension at home because now there's sort of a struggle between your dad who wants to embrace his Jewish heritage and your mom who's reluctant to do that. I can certainly see how something like that could happen. And maybe, let me just ask you this question. First of all, how old are you?
I'm 19.
Yeah, so let me ask you, just throw this past you. Is it possible that if you're at home and you embrace your Jewish faith and worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob alone, and celebrated Passover and Shabbat, would that in some way create some tension because it would appear to your mom that you're choosing your dad over your mom in some way, that you're choosing his path rather than her path?
Yeah, that's actually, she brings that up a couple times, and it frustrates her. So I'm not, I really don't know what to do sometimes.
Right. So this makes complete sense. And that's why I'm going to keep you, William. I'm going to just keep him on for a moment.
That's fine. Perfect.
So this is what makes complete sense, because why would your mother oppose you observing Shabbat, observing Passover, praying in a way that's Jewish? How does that bear upon her? Now, I understand why she would want people to be Christians and so on, and certainly you would want to help her and address her questions. But bear in mind, for your mom, Christianity is almost certainly not just a belief, but it has become her whole world. It's become her all her social connections are intimately connected to the church. Her friends are from the church. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, so therefore, for her to leave Christianity could be frightening. A, B, in a sense, it's sort of giving in to your dad because you've expressed that there's some tension there. C, it's frightening her because she's been told she's going to go to hell if she doesn't believe in Jesus. But also very important is it would bring not some, but a considerable amount of public shame to her social network, which has become very important to her. I mean, given that there's tension now between your mom and dad at home, your mom's source of social contact probably is less your dad and more the other people from the church. So it's what is beneath the surface here is a lot of social networking and your mother's trauma of losing everything, losing a family and so on, meaning her new family, the church. So if you bear this in mind, you can traverse this more easily. And one of the things you can do is just reassure your mom that you love her very, very much, and this has nothing to do with dad, but you are worshiping the one God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and because of your Jewish faith, that makes you want to honor her and love her even more. See? So you want to convey that to her because there's also a fear, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, your mother may be concerned that if you embrace Judaism, she's going to lose you in a way. Because does that mean you're not going to eat my food? And does that mean you're choosing your dad's side? And then that's going to create some distance? And that might be in the back, in front of your mother's mind. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, what all you're saying is very close to home.
Right. So here, what is really important for you to do is to just take your mom's hand and say that, my Jewish faith, which is really the Jewish faith of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, that now inspires me to be closer to you, to honor you, to love you. The Torah says so. And now that you've embraced Judaism, Judaism doesn't make us further apart, Mom. Reassure her that it's going to make us closer. It's going to make me closer to you. And the only thing I'm choosing the one Father who is the Father of all of us. The Torah says so. If you slowly reassure her of that and explain to her that you're not choosing side, you're not choosing your dad over her, and in fact, Judaism is drawing you closer to her. The Torah calls upon you to honor your father and mother and to fear them and so on. That will slowly make her feel a little bit better. And does that make any sense to you?
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you very much.
Be careful about one other thing, my dear brother. Moms love to feed their children. Mom loves to cook. And that I became a vegetarian, so I can't eat from anything that's been cooked, and I can't eat any meat or I can't even eat. There are vegetarians that are so religious they won't even eat from a pot that we used to cook meat. So, and that probably wouldn't bother your mom that much, but this might be more scary to her if you say, I just can't eat that because of my faith as Judaism, and the Torah commands us to eat only clean foods. Leviticus 11, slaughtered properly, Deuteronomy 12. So that could be touchy. Oh, you won't even eat the food I cook for you. That really, with a mom, that can really hit home, because that means like it's not good enough. So try to explain to her that, look, it's a way of honoring Hashem, and you need to compensate for that a little bit. What may seem trivial to you might be very important to her. And if you sort of get what's going on, the triangulation, your mom, dad, you at home, you'll be able to be observant. Hashem wants you to be faithful to His Torah and to keep the commandments and to have a personal relationship with Hashem that's pure, and to be careful about what you eat and be careful about Shabbat. Shabbat is literally life for the soul. Really is it. Shabbat is just a delight. It lifts you up. And I'm going to just pray to Hashem with you. Would you do this with me? Would you consider saying the Shema with me together as a Jew?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to read together Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Okay? And it's just a passage that you should say in the morning and the evening. And we'll do that together now. There's a really big mitzvah. Okay? So what we do is we just cover our eyes. And I'm going to say it in Hebrew. And say it after me. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So Shema
Shema
Yisrael
Israel
Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu
Elohim
Adonai
Adonai
Echad.
Echad.
Welcome home.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will
Be
definitely
very-
send you
be-
an email.
Send me a message. And one thing, my dear brother, be very careful until Passover is over next week. Don't eat anything that could possibly have any, unless you find matzah in some supermarket, which you might be able to. But don't eat any cake, bread, anything that might have any grain product in it. Just be really careful with that. Okay?
Okay. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you.
Happy Passover.
Happy Passover.
Okay, very good. Yeah, very touching. Glad to see that. Okay, phone lines are back open, guys. Yeah, very good. Rabbi, how much time do we have anyway? Oh, we'll take this call. Got to turn this down some. Jeez. 1 second. Caller, welcome to the show. You're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, Mr. William. I'm John. I called last time, if you remember, from Bahrain.
Yes. Welcome, sir.
Yeah. I think there was a lag of 3 to 4 seconds last time. That's why it couldn't be audible. I have just one question for you there. Only one? Am I not allowed to ask two? Just one?
Well, we're kind of short on time today, so what's your most important question?
Okay, fine. The most important one is regarding Isaiah 7:14. Well,
Good.
I do know that it's not talking about Jesus and all. I have heard that before. My question is, on the next verse, when they say it's talking about Isaiah's son, like you shall so and so call that name Emanuel. But why is it in Isaiah 8, Isaiah doesn't call his son Emanuel? Because whenever the Bible says the person shall be called by so and so name, that name will be called. But why only in Isaiah they didn't call by Emanuel?
That's a really great question. I didn't even see that one coming. So you're asking why in Isaiah 8 is the son called a completely different name? That's a
Yes.
great. You're from Bahrain, is that right?
Yes, Bahrain.
Bahrain. All right. Well, assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
I have one small question. That is,
Let's do this. Let's just keep it there. I'll be on with God's help next week, and we'll do more together. Okay? That's a really good question. Not gonna have to.
John, thank you for your call. Go ahead and hang up now. You can
so
tune in
much.
for your answer, okay?
Thank you, Mr. William.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
All right, Rabbi, take it away.
Although that question does not creep on the air very often. Wow, brilliant. Wow, brilliant. Wow, brilliant. So as it turns out, the son that is born to Isaiah's wife in Isaiah 7, so he is to be named in Isaiah 7:14 by the mother, and now I've just given away the answer. The text in Hebrew, it's like Arabic, incidentally, where in English it should say and you will call or she will call, but the word is vikaros, and vikaros means and she will call. In the case of Isaiah 7:14, she will call means the mother will call his name Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So the mommy, and she's there, she came down to the washer's pool in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 4. She came down with an older son, Shar Yoshev, in 7, verse 3 and 4. So she is to name this child Emmanuel, which means that God is with us. And the sign is not the birth of the child or the naming of the child, and that's what the mistake everybody makes, but rather the sign for when the northern kingdom, along with its ally Syria, not Assyria, but Syria, will fail in their effort to seize Jerusalem and destroy the Davidic dynasty. The sign is the maturity of the child, namely that the child will be eating butter and honey when the child knows to reject evil and choose good. Because before that, these two kings will before the child even matures, the child will before the child matures, these two kings will be destroyed. Now, what happens next is we go to Isaiah 8, and in Isaiah 8, the prophet then is intimate with his wife, Isaiah and his wife. That was quite a shidduch. It was quite a couple because Isaiah was a prophet and his wife was a prophetess. So that was really quite a couple. And Isaiah is then in chapter 8 called upon by God to call his name Mahar Shalal Hashbaz, which is essentially a redundant name. It's sort of quicken the loot, hasten the booty. And that double name is there to refer quite directly, unambiguously, to the two kingdoms that threatened the Davidic dynasty. And those two are, number one, the northern kingdom of Israel, because at the time the Jewish people were split into two kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Judah in the south, and the alliance that the northern kingdom made with Syria, not Assyria. And that's really important because Assyria was an enemy of those two. And you could see the next verse. Go to Isaiah 8, verse 4. Just to know that what I'm telling you is really, really correct. You see it in verse 4. For before the child, the boy, knows to say daddy and mommy. Now, how old is a child when a child could speak, could say? And what are the first words that usually comes out of the mouth of a very young child? And what's the first? Mommy, mama, dada. So it's like usually the first thing a child says. How old is a child when a little boy can begin to speak? Depends, but it's young. Certainly, a child is not mature. A child could start saying words before a child knows really grasps the difference between good and evil. And just look at this. Before the boy knows to say, my father, my mother, the wealth of Damascus, that's Syria, and the plunder of Samaria, that's the northern kingdom, will be carried off by the king of Assyria. So there you could see clearly, there's no question, it's exactly the same thing. It's the maturity of the child. I can't overstate how this is completely misunderstood by way too many people. The birth of the child is not the sign. It is for Matthew. Matthew completely just rips it apart. Matthew can't even say, and she will call his name Emmanuel, because Mary never called Jesus Emmanuel, never. In fact, she is told in the Annunciation, she's instructed, we are told, to call his name Jesus. Not Emmanuel. So Matthew actually alters that to, if you look at Matthew 1:23, it says, and they will call his name Emmanuel. But if you go to Isaiah 7:14, it says, and she will call his name Emmanuel. So you have a second person feminine and a third person I don't know. It could be anyone. I mean, what Matthew does to Isaiah 11:14 is just. I laugh because there's two choices here: laughing or crying. It's complete. So, but again, people very frequently just stop short in Isaiah, and Isaiah in particular, because Isaiah there's so much poetry. Although this chapter has a lot of, it actually reads fairly easily with using standard prose and a standard narrative that you would typically find in other books of the Bible, like Kings as an example. But Isaiah is written in a way that that assumes and calls upon the reader to be very familiar with other books, namely Samuel, namely Kings, namely Judges, to know all those other books. Or else, because in the book of Isaiah, what is typical is just events just happen, and they may not be in chronological order, and if they are, they're detached by many, many years from other events prior to and after it, where things are, oh, where did that come from? And what is going on here? Now, you can go to the book of Kings and find a lot more about what happened to the two kings. They were destroyed, Pekah and Rebbetzin, murdered, wiped out. We see it there. Isaiah is not concerned with that. Why is he concerned with this is not germane to your question. So we know it's the same child, but both parents are prophets. And therefore, mommy, prophetess, is instructed to call the boy Emanuel. Daddy, who's a prophet, very famous, is instructed to call the child Maher Shalal Hashbaz, and which essentially means the destruction of the northern kingdom. And that's what, and Syria. And that's the context. And then everything is so clear. And in fact, Isaiah is going to say just a little bit later on that here I am, that I and the children who the Lord gave to me are signs and portents for Israel directly from God, who dwells on Mount Zion, on Mount Zion. And we have the same kind of reference to God with us in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 10. It's really just almost like music. Let them plan the enemies and it will fail. Let them talk, it won't work, it won't be established. Ki imanu kale, because God is with you. And when God is with you, if you bow before the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, everything is possible and you fear no one. Thank you for that great question.
Okay, Rabbi, do you have time for one more?
One more, go for it.
Okay, very good. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from. You're live on the air.
Am I in?
You are live. Go right ahead.
Okay, Rebbe, this is Tzvi Mechanic in Philadelphia. Always good to speak with you, sir. My daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, threw me a curveball of a question, and that is, when Tchias HaMesim happens, will we be allowed to hug the Avos and Imos? Obviously, we hold of Shmiras Nagia, of not touching, people of the opposite, gender. But she wanted to know when Tchias HaMesim happens, will I be allowed to hug Sarah Emanuel? Will she be allowed to hug Yitzchak Avinu?
Oh, Tzvi, real
That's a
quick.
great question.
Okay, Tzvi, I'm going to let you know, Tzvi, for because you call in like we were actually one of our popular callers, and you always have fantastic questions. Remember, when you ask the questions, please do everything in English so everybody who's listening to you talk can get the full grasp of the question from you, and that way when Rabbi Singer goes back to clarify what you say, it doesn't sound like it's pieced together, okay?
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay,
I'll
thank
hang
you.
up and tune in for my answer.
Okay,
Well,
brother.
Dim L'Simcha, Tzvi, be well.
Thank you, Tzvi. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, Rabbi, take it away. Okay.
We are told, sure.
Yeah, just repeat his question and
That's what
with all English. Okay, very good. Thank you.
The question is, when the resurrection of the dead occurs, and we are told in really quite a number of places that the bodies will be of the faithful, those who are loyal to Hashem, will resurrect from the grave. And in fact, the grave is a temporary dwelling. It's the bodies are called by Isaiah Sheichne Ofar, those who simply are kind of temporary dwellers in the grave. It's a temporary place, and they're going to resurrect. Those who believe in the resurrection, who believe and worship the true God, will resurrect. And certainly, our great-great-grandmother, Sarah, our great-great-grandfather, Avram Avinu, who will be among those who resurrect from the dead, of course. And the question is that your little 8-year-old asks, well, could a little girl hug her great-great-grandpa, her great-great-grandfather, her great Saba? And the answer is, of course, your grandchildren could hug and kiss their great-grandmother and great-grandfather. The laws that govern who you can hug and kiss do not apply to immediate family. So your mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, and great-grandmother, the laws don't govern that. It's really a very cute question, but Avram Avinu really is. I actually just said it. I say it so it's such a part of my language. Avram Avinu means Abraham, our father. So Abraham quite literally is my great-grandfather. If I sat here and did the math, it wouldn't be hard for me to come up with the number of generations. Sarah, Imenu, is Sarah, our mother. So very much that's grandma. So I think often, as it turns out, about what it'll be like to see Abraham and Sarah. And I'll, of course, be very, very, very shocked and very excited. And I'll be, I don't know, imagine to see Abraham. Imagine that. That will be something. So, but I think about that a lot. What will it be like to encounter a prophet like Samuel? Wow, Samuel. But Abraham, Daniel, wow, that will be very, very special. May this happen quickly in our time. Thank you for that question, and happy Passover.
All right, Rabbi, thank you so much for all the answers, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on the notifications so you're alerted for each show that we do. On screen, you've got Rabbi Singer's books, 2-volume book set. The CDs are no longer available, but the audio files are. You can find them at outreachjudaism.org and look at the free audio tab. If you've got the books, but you don't have the CD or the audio files to it, you're only getting half of what's there. There's actually more, twice the information. So, also, you see Judaism and Christianity: A Contrast, Rabbi Stuart Federer, Revealing Matthew's Secrets by Jason LaCrosse, and Leaving Jesus by James Wood Jr., all great counter-missionary work. Rabbi, thank you again for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Happy Passover.
Thank you, sir. You as well. And all you people out there, too. We love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד. חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. חושבים דוחים לובשים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. חושבים דוחים לובשים